He wanted to do a beautiful shark documentary showing people how gentle and lovely and intelligent these animals are. And nobody wanted to fund a first-time filmmaker or someone that did a beautiful shark film because they're really Jaws-like creatures. So he left and went all over the world, staying with friends, shooting with other cinematographers, and came back with just this fabulous footage that he put together as Sharkwater.
It opened the eyes to so many people around the world that did not know shark finning was taking place, did not know the sheer numbers.
Today's conversation is about how to save sharks, and our guests are Brian and Sandy Stewart. Brian and Sandy are the co-founders of Tribute Entertainment Media Group, a publishing, marketing, and advertising business focused on movie entertainment. They also founded the Rob Stewart Sharkwater Foundation, an organization committed to protecting sharks, our ecosystems, and our oceans. Now, bear with me for a little bit of a longer but important introduction to today's episode. Rob Stewart, Brian and Sandy's son, was a biologist, conservationist, activist, photographer, and filmmaker. Rob dedicated his life to conservation, saying, "Conservation is the preservation of human life on Earth, and that, above all else, is worth fighting for." His greatest impact was through his 3 films, Sharkwater, Revolution, and Sharkwater Extinction, as well as his books and the millions of supporters that carry on his mission worldwide. These films have been awarded more than 150 international awards and viewed by over 130 million people. At 22 years old, he embarked on a 4-year journey across 12 countries to make his first documentary, Sharkwater, released in 2008. His inspiration was to show viewers the beauty of sharks, the oceans, and its creatures, so people would love them and work to protect them. Along this journey, he also learned about the devastating practice of shark finning, which is when, disclaimer warning, graphic warning, a shark is brought on board, its fins are cut off, and then the animal is thrown back into the water. He used his voice through this film to spotlight this issue. Sharkwater went on not only to win international awards, but more importantly was credited as being the first to bring this issue to light. The exposure sparked the creation of not just conservation groups, but changes in government policies around the world. Now, I don't want to give away too much from the film, but hopefully this provides context into why we're having this conversation today. In this film, he shares that up to 150 million sharks per year are killed by humans, but researchers estimate that this number could be far closer to 273 million. Shark populations have dropped 90% in 30 years and are at risk of extinction. Now, as an apex predator, this has a devastating impact on larger marine ecosystems. If food webs collapse, this has negative repercussions, not just ecologically, economically, but also impacting overall climate change. His subsequent film, Revolution, released in 2012, spotlighted the catastrophic effects of ocean acidification from carbon emissions. Now this is common knowledge, but he was credited as being one of the first to create an impactful feature film bringing this to light as well. His third film, Sharkwater Extinction, was made as a follow-up to Sharkwater. While the first resulted in numerous countries banning the practice of shark, quotations, finning, the practice continued through lax enforcement and loopholes in international laws. This matters because it also meant that shark meat would be repurposed and relabeled into things you will never believe. But we'll get into that in this episode. It would be an understatement to say that Rob dedicated his life to this mission. While filming Sharkwater Extinction in the Florida Keys, at 37 years old, he tragically passed in a diving accident. To honor him and his mission, his loved ones came together to finish the film, including Rob's parents, Brian and Sandy Stewart, who brought filmmakers Sutra Gunnarsson and editor Nick Hector on board to complete the film. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 7th, 2018, and then began a global theatrical release. It's been featured at over 200 international film festivals around the world and is now available worldwide on Amazon Prime. His work and that of the entire Sharkwater team has continued to make an impact in this space to this day. This includes, but isn't limited to, airlines, hotels, courier services, and theme parks having banned shark fins. The Chinese government banned shark fin soups at state banquets. The California drift net ban was signed in fall 2018. In June 2019, Canada became the first G20 nation to ban the import and export of shark fins, crediting Rob. Fiji followed closely in July 2019. Mozambique banned commercial fishing of whale sharks, manta rays, or any mobula species in 2021. In 2022, the U.S. House and Senate passed the Shark Fin Sales Elimination Act and the Drift Gillnet Bill, ending the use of drift nets in U.S. federal waters. Colombia has banned shark fishing in the country, and the UK has banned shark fin trade entirely. And the list goes on. Rob believed that one person could make a difference, and together we can bring positive change. The Rob Stewart Sharkwater Foundation was created in his honor to pick up the torch and continue his mission. Their fin-free and shark-free campaigns bring awareness to issues facing sharks and oceans and inspire action. Now, on a quick personal note, while I'm obsessed with sharks, and this may or may not be new or common knowledge to you if you're listening, Rob has and continues to be an inspiration to me. I remember when I was a young girl, and when this film came out, Rob showcased and led by example of how storytelling not only has the impact to shine a light on issues we care about, but to also fuel tangible change and a lasting impact. I cannot recommend enough checking out these films, his work, and who he was as an incredible human. Without further ado, this is How to Save Sharks with Brian and Sandy Stewart. Thank you, both of you, for taking the time to share all this information today. You are both a tremendous wealth of knowledge, and we really appreciate you being here today and for all the work that you do in shark conservation and ocean conservation in general. So first and foremost, if you could both share not only your journey to shark conservation, Rob's journey, and how everything Sharkwater came to be.
You may as well start it. It goes back a long time.
Oh, we used to travel a lot when the kids were little. We always traveled a lot. And we took them to exotic places during March break and after Christmas every year and sometimes through the summer. And Rob just developed a wonderful love of everything nature. And we'd get out of a car at a hotel, and 2 seconds later, this little 2 or 3 year old would be climbing into the koi pond, or he'd be catching a lizard in the bushes. And he just continued with that his entire life. We always considered ourselves conservationists, nothing to the level that Rob took it to. But swimming in the Caribbean, he saw his first shark, and he was just dying to go diving after that. He'd be in the water every day catching whatever crab or fish would come close enough for him to get to.
Yeah, he had more pets after these trips than we really want to talk about. He would keep them in little fine plastic containers and keep them in the hotel room. He brought a tortoise into what we were on a ground floor once. He brought a tortoise in to be our day pet. He would catch it. He had no fear of the wild. He just embraced it.
And the weirder and the uglier they were, the more fun they were. He obviously liked the cute, cuddly things too. We had fostered cats and kittens when he was young as well. And we had 3 cats, a dog, various pets, a guinea pig. What else did we have?
Until Rob started getting into the exotic pets, and that became snakes and giant iguanas and Komodo, not a Komodo dragon, but something a smaller version.
And those are the animals that are almost underappreciated, right? And I find that's similar with sharks, where people often, at least when I express, like, what animal are you passionate about? You're like, sharks. And people are like, why? Yeah. What about puppies? What about kittens? Where do I start with why I'm passionate about sharks?
Perception is everything. On the Jaws perception of sharks, that when that movie was released, just continued, and people see them as huge, giant monsters. But the perception's changing.
Yes, it is changing. But ironically, even to this day, someone plays the theme from Jaws, and it brings back these stark memories of, I can't go in the water. People wouldn't go in lakes or rivers. People were afraid to go underwater in their bathtub, for Christ's sake. It just became insane. And I think that level of fear really permeated society to the point that people did not have any appreciation for what sharks were and how valuable they were to all of us and to keeping the oceans.
The perception is changing. You can't go into a kid's clothing store these days without finding a million T-shirts and sandals and shorts.
Hats.
Yeah, they've got sharks all over them. So I think Rob is a big part in that. It's one of his legacies that in that first movie where he's seen hugging a shark and swimming with sharks, I think that started a definite trend towards people appreciating them.
My mom was shocked when I said, I'm passionate about sharks. I want to go diving with sharks. So I can only imagine, what was that conversation between you and Rob, not only when it came to diving with sharks, but even saying, nope, this is the film I want to set out and make.
He was just dying to dive with sharks. But it was a gradual transition because remember, we're down swimming in the oceans every year. So it just got to be a normal transition. But he pestered us endlessly to take him out diving. And at that time, you couldn't get a PADI certification until you were 13 years old. And we were down in Mexico the year before and did one of these resort dive courses where they put you in the pool for about 5 minutes. And then you're good enough to go in the boat. And we did that. It was terrifying. But he was just absolutely thrilled. He was always like the first one out in the water off the boat and the last one out.
Yeah, his passion for diving was just, it let him explore a world that he had wanted to explore with much greater depth and ability than he had before that. And once he became a diver, he spent more time probably underwater when he was traveling than he did above water. It was just one of those things. He just wouldn't stop.
When he finally got to be 13-year-old, I got a dive instructor that did the whole family. And of course, Rob is just absolutely thrilled. Brian and Alex, his sister, not so much. But everybody participated, and we did this intense weekend dive experience. And then they did deep water dives down south, where there's more interesting creatures and the visibility is better and it's warmer.
How did the film come to be? When I was a kid, I found out about shark finning and was shocked and horrified, like many other people are when they find out about shark finning for the first time. Then Sharkwater, the film, was released. What was the transition from saying we are passionate about sharks, discovering this issue, and then actually becoming a leading global voice and activist for this cause? And I do want to celebrate not just Rob, but the entire Sharkwater team and both of you and your entire family for relentlessly pursuing this mission.
He developed a passion for taking pictures and took his camera everywhere. And this started out with some smaller, less expensive disposable camera that went into the ocean. But he took that and ran with it. And he was working with the Canadian Wildlife Magazine and their kids' magazines and doing outdoor nature shoots. And people started hiring him. And this went on through university. He was going all over the world on photo shoots into the most exotic places. His passion was still underwater, but a lot of his shooting was actually above the water. Many awards for that. And when he finished university, he was invited to come along a Sea Shepherd boat that was going down to save sharks. Actually,
it was going down.
I have to back up for a second. On one of his trips where he was sent to the Galapagos Islands, before anybody knew anything, he saw the shark finning going on with miles and miles of baited hooks. And why were they trying to kill sharks? And why did they want the shark fins? And once he found out, he was absolutely horrified and just vowed that he was going to change this, and came back and did all sorts of stories, which he gave away for free just to get the messaging out there. Remember, he was paid to do stories and paid to do photography, but he gave these away, and it didn't have the impact when he got to graduating from university. He was invited on the Sea Shepherd boat down to the Galapagos Islands and Costa Rica to save sharks from shark finning.
Yeah. And then what he found when he went down there, he found miles and miles of long lines with dead, dying sharks all along the lines, hundreds of sharks. This just horrified him. But fortunately, before he went, he was shooting digital cameras, the typical Nikon digital camera. They were being introduced quite heavily, and they were amazing. You take as many shots as you want, the ones you need. And then we discovered through some contacts that they had a brand new Panasonic HD video camera that would also allow you to freeze frame the shot. So you could take the video and then choose the segment you want and freeze frame it. So we talked about that, and we ended up renting this camera for him, and then he found a guy in Los Angeles to make a housing to take it underwater. And that was really what set Rob off in his filmmaking. And on the plane down, he wrote a book on how to make a movie and stuff like this, because he had no idea what he was going to end up doing. But the footage that they shot, and then the footage there was attempted arresting Paul Watson and Rob and on attempted murder charges because they rammed a boat, and it's not really, they didn't ram the boat, ran into them, and it was all this convoluted story that's been done in a couple of movies now. And the reality was, Rob came back to this footage and decided he really had to tell a story that would reach the masses, and he knew that because of our background in the film industry, he knew movies have a huge impact if they can be seen by people. And the reality is he set out. We had some contacts he sat with, so it wasn't Sandy and I that said, go do it. He met with some people in the film industry that we happen to know, and they sat back and he says, he's really got something here. He has to finish this movie.
But before that, when he first came back, he wanted to do a beautiful shark documentary showing people how gentle and lovely and intelligent these animals are. And nobody wanted to fund a first-time filmmaker or someone that did a beautiful shark film, because they're really Jaws-like creatures. So he left and went all over the world, staying with friends, shooting with other cinematographers, and came back with just this fabulous footage that he put together as Sharkwater. And we're in the film industry as well, but not the creative side. He did this movie entirely by himself. I think he did, I don't know, 80 different cuts of it. And each time putting more of the story part into it, not just the hours of the beautiful sharks underwater.
Yeah, and I think the success of the film was really, it opened the eyes to so many people around the world that did not know shark finning was taking place, did not know the sheer numbers. In those days, the numbers were something around 75 million or 73 million was the number that Rob introduced in Sharkwater, and that number has stuck for years. But now it's exploded to over 150 million a year they're being taken. And that's probably a much smaller number than the reality, because they're expecting it could be 250 to 300 million sharks that are disappearing from the world's oceans. And there aren't that many left. The reality is that we're doomed if we don't do something about this very quickly.
To your point about how great movies can have great impact. And Sharkwater, the first Sharkwater, and please correct me on my numbers here, that changed policies in over 90 countries around the world relating to finning.
That's right. And it created hundreds and hundreds of organizations focused on saving sharks. All of the major conservation groups created shark silos because of that film. It just had an enormous impact. Public policy changed everywhere. The Chinese government doesn't serve shark fin soup at their banquets anymore. The awareness from that film was just enormous. 125 million people saw that.
And I think that the big advantage, that once they got the momentum behind him, he was being asked to go and speak because of his passion for it, to speak in different places in universities and schools and TEDx conferences and so on. And that gave him a voice to take with him. And the movie was the backdrop to his voice as he extended his reach. And I think that was one of the great things that made him confident about continuing down that path of becoming a filmmaker. And I think that's one of the things that was so great about it, was seeing him grow as a filmmaker after having no training whatsoever, just reading a book on how to make a movie. On that movie, he shot the whole thing, he edited the whole thing, he did voice over, he did all the color, he chose the music and hired the music composer, who eventually became a very close friend and has gone on to do a number of movies in the environmental world. It just was a real passion project.
Had a huge crew on it too. But he would sit there in the studio because he knew what color the underwater water would look like. So he was involved in all aspects of it, and editing, and he sat with the music composer because this is the feeling I want through this scene.
It blows my mind that how long it's been since Sharkwater released, how many organizations have popped up, how many policies have been changed, but still how far there is to go. And before I'm really passionate about wanting to dive into the what needs to change part of this conversation, but would love to lay the backdrop for people of why should we care, especially for so many people living in areas where either maybe they've been in fear of sharks because they just don't live in those environments and that the whole Jaws fallacy still exists in their minds, or you live in a city that you're nowhere near an ocean and you don't realize how important these creatures are, not just to our ocean, but our entire stability of our planet. As experts in this, paint that picture for people of why we need to care.
Sharks are really important to the oceans. They're a keystone species, and they've been there for 450 million years. So everything that's involved in the oceans, and all life on Earth started in the oceans, they've evolved under sharks being the top predator on our planet. And if you take the top predator out of any kind of environment, the ripple effect that it has on that ecosystem, that environment, can be catastrophic. Sharks in the oceans on reefs keep reefs safe. They take out invasive species. If they're gone, what happens is the fish underneath them explode. Those fish eat the smaller fish all the way down the line to the plankton. What's really important for our Earth is the oceans, because they give us 60% of our oxygen. They absorb most of our heat. They absorb 30% of our carbon gases. We can't live on the top side of the world without the oceans. They're just so important. And sharks manage that ecosystem. There's coastal bays and communities all over the world where there's seagrasses, and turtles feed there, seals feed there. They host shellfish and oysters. And if you take the sharks out of that, the turtles, the sea lions explode. They eat all the seagrass. The shellfish die off. And then you've got a bay where there's nothing that lives there. So that you're not just taking one animal out of an ecosystem, you take all of the animals out of the ecosystem when you take a predator out in some cases, and it just has a catastrophic influence. So they're just really important. We need
Yeah,
to
and one of
keep
the
them.
key things now is that we're finding, and this is one of the heartbreaking elements, is we're finding that they're now taking baby hammerheads and using them as fake scallops. They just cut them into slices and pass them off as scallops because the scallop is worth more money in the market.
So many of the large sharks are gone that the only ones left are the babies. And it's easy to fish out a nursery. You just put in gill nets and you can wipe out the entire season's babies in a matter of weeks. In the coastal communities, it's really important. Rob never wanted the coastal communities to stop fishing. If you're fishing for your livelihood to feed your family.
Yeah, we're facing extinction. The oceanic white tip is going to be extinct probably within five years. Its populations have dwindled by 99%. There's other sharks like the blue sharks that are being devastated off the west coast of Africa has been wiped out of blue sharks. Rob was there shooting on the Canary Islands, and all the sharks are gone. They've been gone for years.
The Bahamas banned shark fishing, I don't know, a number of years ago, and now shark tourism is such an enormous value to their economy, over $200 million. Sharks are actually worth a lot more alive than they are dead. I think the value of a shark is something over $250,000 a year, just with the ecotourism that it brings in. But these are one-off spots. We need to do more of that all over the world. 90% of the sharks in the reefs in warm waters are now gone. And 90% of the large sharks are gone too. And that's an enormous amount. Every living thing on the planet stores carbon in their body. So when you take all of these wildlife out of the ocean, the large tunas and the large sharks, all of that carbon gets released into the environment. So they're actually helping climate change by keeping the oceans clean, by not releasing the carbon into the atmosphere, by keeping the seagrasses safe because they eat the predators that eat the seagrass. They're super valuable. And they're cute and lovable and intelligent.
If you don't care about sharks, you probably care about the cute little sea turtles and the cute little dolphins and whales and things like that. But they all play a part with one another in these ecosystems. And especially, I love that you brought up the seagrass. If our seagrass is gone, that's a huge opportunity for carbon capture naturally occurring on our planet.
Yes.
So many places have adopted different shark finning bans and policies. And I would love to give you guys a huge shout out right now where you are the reason policies are in place in Canada, and that Canada is the first G20 country to ban shark finning and the export of it.
We're super proud of that win, and it's, as you say, the first G20 country. The U.S. actually got close last year. The Shark Fin Sales Elimination Act passed through the House at the end of 2019, and it was supposed to go through the Senate.
The research is hands down unanimous. Everybody wants something done about this. The reality is politicians who are influenced by people with deep pockets make decisions that aren't really the best interest of their public. And I think what happens in Florida, for example, Rubio has helped draft or helped put through legislation that says a slight shark fin ban, but not really. The guys who are currently shark finning can continue to do what they're going to do is stop allowing imports to go through Miami, which is a center hub for distribution from the Caribbean and Costa Rica and countries like that.
That's gone through now. Yeah. Still, when you're doing transshipments through other countries and you've got a huge shipment that goes through Miami, they caught a huge one last year worth millions and millions of dollars. But those are hard to find sometimes. Opening up a shipping container that's coming in on a huge shipping vessel.
You can see the Suez Canal and the boat that blocked the Suez Canal recently. You imagine trying to find a container of shark in that. And there are freezer containers that keep the shark bodies frozen, the shark fins frozen, and so on. Sorting through that and sorting through the illegal paperwork that you saw in Sharkwater Extinction. People label it one thing and it's something else. And that happens all the time in the shark industry. So there's no economic comparison between what could be beneficial for the state of Florida versus what a few fishermen need as income, which is terrible.
And it's interesting with shark tourism because, of course, there are so many sharks that actually catch and release is not healthy for them either.
There's a fallacy in the shark catch and release reality. Is a hammerhead shark on a hook will die. Whether you cut them off or not, they don't survive. They can't take the stress. So we see that numerous times, and they drag them up on the beach, take the hook out, take a picture, and let him go. He'll be dead with probably an hour. There's a lot of people that believe catch and release does work. It really doesn't for a number of species of sharks. So that's one of those things that we have to educate people about. And the more people know about it, the more they realize the stress they put these animals under is so extensive. To be dragged behind a boat with a hook in your mouth, they can't handle it. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we should be leaving sharks alone and let them get healthy, let them rebound. The best thing we can possibly do is stop fishing everything for 10 years. Give the oceans a chance to rebound. And
definitely for sharks, the commercial fishing vessels that are out there targeting schools of sharks and millions of tunas, that's the most damaging. Rob started working with the Turks and Caicos in 2014 to develop a marine park in that area, and they don't really fish sharks down there to eat. And shark finning wasn't really a thing there, and it's still not. But set up a marine park and a marine corridor, and we're working with Turks and Caicos, as well as Richard Branson's BVI Unite in the Virgin Islands, to create a corridor that goes all the way through the Caribbean, from the Bahamas all the way south, so that they don't end up crisscrossing out of protected marine parks and getting scooped up. Trinidad is almost like a port that you would see in Asia, the number of sharks that go in and out of there.
And a lot of the Chinese fishing vessels, the supersized ones, come in there and pick up the fish to take them to China, because China basically bought the port in Trinidad. It lent money to the government, and the payoff was they would control the rights to the port, which has allowed them to basically do whatever they want. So that's a major problem for all of the Caribbean.
I'm going to be honest here, that can sometimes feel a little hopeless, and we can't feel hopeless. Yeah. What can consumers be doing? And what do we do about, we might have protected marine reserves and a corridor, but then there's only so much you can do in domestic waters, but then you have the international waters issue.
No one regulates international waters. There's no UN body that regulates the waters. What goes on outside the territorial boundaries of each country is the Wild West. There's no regulations, there's no controls, there's no monitors, there's no policing.
The UN is working on some kind of an international agreement, but it seems to be years away.
And it'll be blocked by China and Russia and other countries that don't want to see an end to this kind of Wild West in the open ocean. The reality is that, you have to somehow stop the demand. And stopping the demand is maybe the next generation, the young people looking at how their parents live and what they're consuming. Shark fin soup is going down in countries around the world, and now all of a sudden it's exploded in places like Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam.
There's huge populations in Asia. And even though percentage-wise, maybe less people are doing the shark fin soup at weddings, there's so many more people in the middle class that now have the money to afford that. The demand is still really high. I think one of the best things that people can do is bring awareness to the issue.
It's an environmental issue. It's an issue about man's survival on this planet. If the oceans go down, we go down afterwards. And if anybody doubts that, then they're basically ignorant of science and ignorant of nature and ignorant of how we live on this earth. And I think ignorance is no excuse anymore. We're making people aware. They should be aware of the consequences of their actions. And the best they can do is be an aware consumer. Talk about it. Look at how you live your life. And as Rob would say so many times, you make choices with your dollar every day you spend one. And every time you spend a dollar, are you spending it in the route of conservation and environmental protection, or are you spending it for devastation and destruction? There's small steps you can make, but just start thinking a little bit more how you spend your money. And certainly, as we've started this whole shark-free initiative in cosmetics, it comes down to, if you look at your cosmetic purchases, if you see the word squalene, second guess that decision to purchase it. If it is shark squalene, don't purchase it.
Or if you don't know, don't purchase it, because most squalene that you see in cosmetics is actually coming from shark liver. People fish sharks for two reasons. It's for their fins, or it's for their shark liver. And 90% of the shark liver that's fished out there goes into the cosmetics industry. So if you see squalene on a label and you don't know it's a vegetable-based product, just don't buy it.
Move on.
And the rest of the sharks sadly go into byproducts: fertilizer, fish food pellets, cat foods, pet foods.
Although you should also be aware that I've read a recent report about shark meat is turning up. The imitation crab you find in restaurants, or you find in grocery stores when you go to buy crab, you'll see imitation crab. That imitation crab is shark.
Can be shark, yes.
In most cases now it is.
But people serve shark and fish and chips, and it's called rock salmon or flake, whitefish, ocean whitefish. And they found that somewhere between 60 and 80% of the fish that you buy out there is actually mislabeled. And in some cases, countries, those labels have been out there for
50 to 60?
50 to 60% of all fish being labeled for retail sale is mislabeled.
And the stuff that you buy in restaurants, it's mislabeled.
Yeah, there's
study after study.
You can't buy orange roughy anymore. It doesn't exist, really. It's not being. And there are so many species that have been fished out that now they're replacing with something that might look the same. And people get used to. That's what I'm saying about the imitation scallops and imitation crab, where there's so many others. If you buy fish and chips on the street in the UK, anywhere, or in Germany or in Spain, you're going to be getting shark. It's shark and chips.
And when you're buying tacos on the beach in Baja or California or LA,
you're getting shark.
You're getting shark meat as well. You want a sustainable fishery, and if you've got that ratio of bycatch, it's not. One of the things we're working on is the California drift nets. In 2018, California banned drift net fishing. But the waters just outside of the California waters, Trump vetoed that just before he left office. So that's back on the table. The California group instantly put it back into the legislation. So it'll go through again. But those are huge nets that sink hundreds of feet below the water, and they catch whales and dolphins and sharks and birds. And
all in the name of trying to catch swordfish. I think the average set for every swordfish they kill between 30 and 40 other species.
For people who don't know what bycatch means.
If they really are interested, we'll see it, and it would be devastating to see the footage of things being brought up and then sliced apart and thrown back in the water because it wasn't the catch they wanted. But this happens every day in the tune of millions of species millions of creatures every day are being destroyed and thrown back. And that's the kind of, this industrialized fishing has got to stop. The ocean can't sustain it. It's just not viable. But nothing can be done about it because there's no rules or regulations until people and consumers stop buying the stuff. The demand will always continue. And as Sandy said, the exploding populations in some countries that are coming into more money and more wealth and are part of the middle class are wanting all these things.
I want to backtrack to what you mentioned about shark-free, because for people who don't know, squalene as an ingredient, if your products contain it, they say 100% plant-derived squalene or squalene on the label. And if it doesn't say that, please don't buy it. So these are the little pieces of education that if people don't realize, so many moisturizers, fillers, lipstick products, suntan lotion, you could be putting shark on your face.
So we're working this year and the last couple of years with the cosmetics associations around the world, in Canada and in the US and in the European Union, to bring awareness to this issue. You have no idea how many people inside the cosmetics industry itself don't know that squalene actually comes from sharks. And there's a consumer side to this as well. We want people reading labels. That's one of the biggest things that you can do. And you can find squalene in sunscreen, lip balms, lipstick. It's virtually everywhere.
Yeah.
There's bigger companies that decided earlier on, at some point after Sharkwater, not to use shark squalene. Unilever, L'Oreal, Beiersdorf. And there's all sorts of vegan cosmetic companies out there that are environmentally conscious. Lush Cosmetics. There's be an educated consumer, and you'll have a huge impact.
I think reality is the next generation can make a huge difference if they think and become an educated consumer. And that comes down to buying lipsticks or your pet food, where we found 50% of the wet cat food we tested contained shark. So if you're feeding your cat, you could be feeding your cat shark as well. When did nature ever decide cats could eat shark? This just doesn't make any sense. The trout pellets they're feeding to trouts in trout ponds and in fish farming. Let's get shark out of all these products. And that's really what Shark-Free's ultimate goal will be. We have a certification process we're implementing. The first layer is obviously cosmetics, where we have a lot of support right now to make this happen worldwide. And I think that's really where we're going to call upon consumers to be our backbenchers, to say, yeah, we're checking, we're looking, we're watching the labels, and they'll appreciate a shark-free label on a product to know, I trust this company now. And we hope that becomes part of their marketing strategies. These major companies and other companies that are they're looking at how they're producing their product. If they can say they're shark-free, consumers will start to notice that. And I think that's going to help all of us.
A question for you both then, when it comes to trusting labels. You are working on Shark-Free with the best intentions. How do you go about labeling products like this and monitoring to make sure that companies continue to adhere to these standards over time?
There'll be actual testing at several levels, including DNA. So we'll know for sure if your product has shark squalene in it. And then it'll be up to the individual companies to go back through their supply chains and make sure that through their supply chains, they mandate that if they're using squalene, they're not using shark squalene. Olive oil as a synthetic is readily available. Actually, it's a natural product, olive oil, squalene, and it's a synthetic made out of sugarcane too. This is very specific.
Yeah, so we can do that. And I think the same thing will hold true. We will not just accept someone's word for it. I think there are various organizations that have used that and promised to be good, so to speak. We don't believe that is going to be the mantra that we're going to be going by. We're going to verify that they are being good. They are following the guidelines. Shark-free is going to be a labeling that we will ensure will continue to be tested.
And the industry wants this themselves.
Which is amazing. And I think it tells you an awful lot about people realizing there is a right way to do things.
It should be just a good corporate policy, no matter who you are, not to engage in the trade of endangered species, whether they're sharks or whether they're plants out of the Amazon or exotic woods.
You can volunteer. You can not eat in restaurants that serve shark fin soup. You can turn your way from restaurants that continue to serve unknown species of product. When you go to a restaurant and you order your fish and chips, ask them what kind of fish they've used. Ask them how they know that's a certain fish, and a lot of them will not know. Even the restaurateurs don't have any idea that what they've ordered as oceanic whitefish is actually shark, that they have no idea what they're not taught this stuff.
And don't eat or order or buy farmed fish. It takes 5 pounds of regular fish to provide those fish food pellets for farmed fish. It's a very destructive form of fishing. And the infections that go on in those fish farms are disgusting. Giant leeches that attach to sea lice.
Paul Nicklin did a series where he snuck into some of the fish farms out in BC. It can be an uncomfortable conversation by asking that.
Movement within the fishing industry, and some of the larger grocery stores are now demanding this as well, where you track the fish down to where it was caught. So you're not just buying a load of something. Some of the grocery stores are doing just a fantastic job. As only selling what they are proving to themselves as being a sustainable species of fish.
Are there any you recommend then? Specific grocery stores?
I would recommend Loblaws in Canada, absolutely, and Sobeys in Canada. And in the US, and you have to be careful, lots of products are organic. If you're buying a fertilizer and you're thinking, great, I'm buying an organic fertilizer, you got to read the label because maybe it's just minced fish parts that they've used. Shark is super high in mercury, and the FDA in the US, if you're buying shark steak somewhere, has a warning label on it that women of childbearing age and children should not be eating that because mercury can really damage your brain development. And the same thing is true of tuna. You'll see it on the tuna fish cans in Canada.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, despite all the issues we need to protect sharks from the environment, it's now detrimental to your health to be consuming shark. And some of the countries that the highest consumption of shark is in Brazil, Spain, and Italy, which most people wouldn't realize. And the question now, we've talked to some scientists about saying, is there a disproportionate percentage of mercury poisoning in consumers in those countries because of the amount of shark they eat?
When Rob came to us and said he was doing Sharkwater Extinction, a follow-up to Sharkwater, and I was surprised. I looked at him and I said, what about Revolution? Revolution was about ocean acidification, killing all of the oceans. Isn't that more serious? And he said, yes. But sharks don't have that much time. By the time we figure out the ocean issues, they'll be gone. So we really need to do something quickly.
If Rob's numbers are right, by the time, but it's been 4.5 years since he passed, you're talking about almost 1 billion sharks in that period of time since he was last making the movie. That's just too many of any species. I can't imagine 1 billion of anything. If you want to put it, you can't put 1 billion sharks on a football field. You can't put 1 billion sharks of anywhere and realize this sheer quantity of sharks that have been devastated. And it's been going on like this for years and years. So the reality is we need to do something about it. We need to become more aggressive in some ways and more informed because education for this is everything. People just don't know.
But we can't give up and we can't lose hope. I believe that we could all do this together. Young people, kids would be a big part of it. So spreading the awareness to begin with that there's an issue with overfishing and sharks and shark finning and shark livering The more people that know about that, the more people will start reading labels.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of fun when we do screenings and we do Q&As afterwards. 99% of the time, the first question from the audience is, how do I tell if my lipstick's got squalene in it? And the reality is they learn about it, and I'm sure they go home and check their suntan lotions, and I think they check their products, and they start second-guessing it, which is great.
So overall, it is hard for a consumer in some cases. With cosmetics, it's very clear. It's squalene or squalene, whether it comes from a vegetable source or a shark source, and it's usually shark, so avoid it unless you know for sure. If it's in cat food, if you have sharks in cat food, it's just ocean whitefish. That is legally what it's allowed to be called. It is an ocean whitefish, and it's just a byproduct of the shark finning or the shark liver industry. When you get it in restaurants, flake or rock salmon, all sorts of different names that have become common within the fish and chips restaurant industry. So they're legally out there. You really have to be an educated consumer.
And the Sharkwater website has a full list of this. I'm going to include the link in the show notes, but for people to visit the page, please go to Sharkwater's website, look up the Shark Free page, and read this list. If you question anything, you can always go back to it. You thankfully have created this resource for people. Is there anywhere else or anything we haven't talked about in this conversation?
It's tough to touch on everything, but I think the most important thing is, just let people know. I think what you're doing, even by talking to us about this and the people you reach out to, if every one of those people becomes slightly impassioned to get involved in some way, and they talk to 10 more people, it will snowball. People will become more aware. Watch the movies. Watch Sharkwater, Extinction, Seaspiracy, and other movies like this. Chasing Coral. There's some great movies out there. One of the ironies is when the movie The Cove did so well, it won an Academy Award. But the problem is worse today than it was when they shot the movie.
It didn't have an impact.
Didn't have any change at all in saving dolphins.
Which is sad. The world is horrified that it hasn't had an impact yet.
Yeah.
I have a request for you and some of your viewers. Yes, if you work for a cosmetic company and your products don't contain, if you do have squalene in there and you're just not sure, we'll test it for you. We'll test it at no cost. And we'll come back and tell you what's in it on a confidential basis, and then it'll be your choice as to how you handle that.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. I know this conversation is one we're going to continue to have. And please, whoever's listening, don't let this one ride off as another entertainment episode. You can truly have an impact here.
Absolutely.
Thank you for doing what you're doing, because you're taking what you're good at and taking what you're passionate about, and you're putting them together to create change. That's an amazing feat, and congratulations.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. To learn more about Sharkwater's mission, the team, and Rob, head on over to sharkwater.com. Sharkwater Extinction is available for streaming on Crave in Canada and on Amazon worldwide. To learn more or to join the Shark Free campaign, head on over to sharkfree.com. If you'd like to see if your cosmetics are certified shark free by the team, head on over to sharkfree.com/cosmetics. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of How To.